I didn't cry when they handed me the papers. I cried when the champagne hit my face. It wasn't dramatic, no slow motion, just a sharp splash, cold and sticky, running down my neck and into my sweater while people laughed like it was part of the entertainment. Someone gasped. Someone else clapped. I remember thinking how strange it was that sound could hurt more than words. I was standing in a living room big enough to be a hotel lobby, holding a pen that kept slipping in my fingers. My name was already printed on the page. All I had to do was sign. Across from me, my husband didn't look nervous. Lucas looked relieved, like he'd been holding his breath for years and finally let it out. His arm rested comfortably around another woman's waist. She leaned into him like she belonged there, like I didn't. I want you to understand something before I go any further. This wasn't a private fight. This wasn't a quiet breakup. This was a Christmas party, over 200 guests, business partners, friends, people I had served drinks to for years, people who knew my face but never my name. And I was signing my divorce papers on a raised platform, under a massive tree, while phones were pointed at me. If you've ever felt small in a room full of confident people, you know the feeling. Your chest tightens, your ears ring, your body goes numb, but your mind won't stop racing. That was me, standing there, smiling because I didn't know what else to do. I signed anyway, not because I was brave, because I was tired. Tired of explaining myself, tired of apologizing for existing, tired of pretending I belonged somewhere I clearly didn't. Someone pressed cash into my hand afterward, folded bills, like a tip, like I'd done a service and it was time to leave. Security walked me out through the front gates while snow fell softly, almost kindly, onto the driveway. My ring slipped off my finger somewhere between the door and the curb. I didn't look back. That's the part everyone remembers when they tell this story. The humiliation, the public ending, the way I was thrown out like I'd overstayed my welcome. What no one there knew was that I had already stopped feeling embarrassed. Because 3 hours earlier, before the guests arrived, before the lights came on, before the music started, my phone had rung. And nothing had been the same since. But I didn't understand that yet. Not fully. At the time, I thought the call was a mistake or a cruel joke, something meant for someone else. I didn't know it was the beginning of everything unraveling. Let me back up for a moment. My name is Magnolia. I don't come from money. I don't come from connections. I grew up learning how to stay quiet, how to take up as little space as possible. I learned early that if you don't ask for much, people won't notice how little you have. When I married into the Ashford family, I told myself I was lucky. I told myself love was enough. I told myself that if I worked hard, if I kept my head down, if I proved myself, things would get easier. They didn't. That night, standing there with champagne drying on my skin, I finally understood something I had been avoiding for years. They hadn't been waiting for me to fail. They had been waiting for the right moment to get rid of me. And they chose Christmas. With witnesses. With smiles. As I was pushed out into the cold, I remember thinking this was the lowest point of my life, that this was it, that whatever came next would only be survival. I didn't know that while they were celebrating inside, laughing and congratulating themselves, the ground under their lives had already started to crack. I just didn't know how deep it went yet. Before that night, my life looked simple from the outside, almost boring, and honestly, I think that's why I stayed as long as I did. I woke up early every morning, before Lucas, before the house felt tense. I liked the quiet hours when no one needed anything from me. I'd make coffee, clean the kitchen, answer emails for my part-time job, then rush to my shift at the cafe. After that, I cleaned offices at night. Sometimes I worked a third job on weekends. None of it was glamorous, but it was predictable. Predictable felt safe. Lucas used to say he admired my work ethic. At first, he'd kiss my forehead and tell me I was strong. Over time, that word started to feel like an excuse, like strength meant I didn't need help, or rest, or appreciation. When his business started growing, he was never home. Meetings, dinners, trips. I told myself that was normal, that this was what supporting someone looked like. I kept track of bills, I cooked, I smiled at family gatherings. I learned which topics to avoid and when to stay quiet. His mother made it clear I was temporary. She never yelled. That would have been too obvious. She just corrected me in front of others, commented on my clothes, asked if I was still working those little jobs. Always smiling, always sweet, like she was doing me a favor by noticing me at all. His father barely spoke to me unless it was to remind me of my place. Not directly. He'd say things like, "Some people just aren't raised for this kind of environment," while looking right past me. And his sister, she treated everything like a joke I wasn't in on. Still, there were moments, quiet ones, movie nights on the couch, late dinners when Lucas came home tired and leaned his head on my shoulder. He'd tell me he couldn't have done it without me. I held onto those words longer than I should have. I thought love was supposed to feel earned. I didn't have a family to fall back on, no parents to call, no childhood home to return to. The Ashfords weren't warm, but they were something, and something felt better than nothing. So I ignored the way Lucas stopped introducing me as his wife. I ignored the way his phone was always face down. I ignored how I was slowly becoming invisible in my own marriage. I told myself I was lucky. I told myself not to be dramatic. I told myself that discomfort didn't mean danger. But looking back now, there was a feeling I couldn't shake, like I was living in a house where the doors were already unlocked. I just didn't know who was about to walk in. The change didn't happen all at once. That's the part people don't understand. No one wakes up one day and realizes they're being erased. It happens in pieces, small enough to explain away, quiet enough to ignore. Lucas started correcting me more, not angrily, calmly, in public. "That's not how it works," he'd say, even when he knew I was right. Or, "You wouldn't understand this part," when the conversation turned serious. At dinners, he'd finish my sentences, then stop letting me start them. His calendar became something I wasn't allowed to ask about. If I did, he'd sigh, like I was being unreasonable, like I was interrupting something important. I learned to stop asking. That felt easier than fighting. One night, I picked up his phone by accident, just to move it. A message popped up from a name I didn't recognize. No words, just a heart emoji. I stared at it longer than I should have. Then I locked the screen and set the phone back down exactly where it was. When Lucas walked in, I smiled like nothing had happened. I hated myself for that smile. After that, I noticed everything. The way his mother watched me at family events, like she was counting down. The way his sister whispered and laughed when I entered a room. The way his father suddenly started talking about clean exits and strategic resets at the dinner table. I asked Lucas once, gently, if something was wrong. He didn't deny it. That scared me more than if he had. "Things change," he said. "You need to keep up." Keep up with what? I wanted to ask. With money, with status, with the version of him that no longer needed me. I started feeling like a guest in my own marriage, like I was renting space that could be taken back at any time. Then there was Diane. I first saw her name in passing, then I heard it spoken out loud, always with respect, always with admiration. His sister mentioned her like she was a prize. His mother smiled when she said it. I told myself I was imagining things. That insecurity was talking, that I was projecting old fears onto a normal situation. But my body didn't believe the lies my mind was telling. I started sleeping lightly, listening for footsteps, for doors closing, for phone calls taken in another room. Every instinct I'd learned growing up, the ones that kept me safe when adults couldn't be trusted, was screaming at me. Something was being planned. I just didn't know if I was brave enough to find out what it was. I didn't catch them kissing. It wasn't anything that clear. It was worse than that. It was the way Lucas looked at her when he thought no one else was watching. The night of the Christmas party, I was already there early. I always was. His mother liked things done a certain way, and I had learned that being useful kept me invisible. I was carrying a tray from the kitchen when I saw them across the room, near the tall windows. Lucas and a woman I didn't recognize at first. She wasn't doing anything inappropriate. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, her head tilted toward him as she spoke. She smiled, and he smiled back in a way I hadn't seen in a long time. Not the polite smile he gave me, something softer, something relaxed. My chest tightened. I stood still for too long. That's when I heard his sister's voice behind me. "Oh, you've finally noticed." I turned. She was smirking, holding a drink she hadn't paid for, enjoying this far too much. "That's Diane," she said. "Isn't she perfect?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mouth felt dry. "She and Lucas go way back," she continued, like she was talking about the weather. "Same schools, same circles, same future, honestly." I wanted to say, "I'm his wife," but the words stayed stuck in my throat. Vanessa leaned closer. "Don't make a scene. It's embarrassing." That was the moment something cracked inside me, not loudly, just enough to let the truth seep in. I watched Lucas laugh at something Diane said. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair away from her face. It was casual, familiar, like practice. Like this wasn't new. I walked into the bathroom and locked the door. I stared at my reflection and didn't recognize the woman looking back. She looked tired, smaller somehow, like she had already been erased and just hadn't been told yet. I checked my phone. No messages from Lucas, not even a question about where I was. When I came back out, the room felt different, warmer, louder, like everyone knew something I didn't, or maybe they had always known. I passed by his mother. She gave me a look that felt almost kind. That should have been my warning. That's when Lucas finally looked at me, just for a second. Our eyes met across the room. There was no guilt in his face, only relief. And in that instant, I understood something that made my stomach drop. This wasn't happening to him. This was being done to me. And whatever was coming next, they had already decided how it would end. After that moment, I stopped asking questions out loud. I started listening instead. That night, after the guests arrived and the music got louder, I slipped into the study under the excuse of looking for napkins. My hands were steady, but my heart was. I told myself I just needed to calm down, that I was overreacting. I wasn't ready for what I would find. Lucas's briefcase was under the desk. He never locked it. I think part of him liked feeling untouchable. I opened it slowly, like the sound might give me away. Inside were contracts, printed emails, and a folder with my name on it. Seeing my name there felt unreal, like reading it on a stranger's gravestone. I didn't take anything. I didn't photograph anything. I just read enough to understand that decisions had been made without me. Legal decisions, financial ones, ones that didn't include a future with my name in it. I put everything back exactly the way it was. For the rest of the night, I played my role. I refilled glasses. I smiled when spoken to. I nodded when Lucas introduced me, if he introduced me at all. Inside, my thoughts kept circling the same question. How long had this been planned? Over the next few weeks, I paid attention in ways I never had before. I checked bank statements late at night when Lucas was asleep. I memorized dates. I noticed withdrawals I didn't recognize, loans I hadn't agreed to. I told myself there had to be an explanation. There always was one before. When I asked carefully, Lucas brushed it off. Business stuff, he said. You don't need to worry. But I did worry. I worried because my savings were shrinking. I worried because my credit alerts started coming in. I worried because I recognized my signature on documents I didn't remember signing. I stopped sleeping through the night. I'd wake up with my heart racing, convinced I was about to lose something I couldn't replace. I didn't know what yet, just that it mattered. I started keeping notes, on paper, hidden in an old notebook from one of my cleaning jobs, dates, amounts, names. I felt ridiculous doing it, paranoid, like I was betraying my own marriage. But a quieter voice inside me kept saying the same thing. If you don't protect yourself, no one will. The hardest part wasn't the fear. It was the hope. The hope that I was wrong. The hope that there was still time. The hope that if I just stayed quiet a little longer, things would somehow fix themselves. I didn't know then that silence was exactly what they were counting on. The night it finally happened, I wasn't surprised. That's what scares me the most now. Some part of me had already accepted it. The Christmas party was meant to be a celebration. That's what the invitations said. The house was full of lights and music, and people who smelled like expensive perfume. Everything looked warm, safe, perfect. It was. I was standing near the edge of the room when Lucas asked everyone to listen. His voice was steady, confident, like he was announcing a promotion, not ending a marriage. He didn't look at me at first. He talked about mistakes, about growth, about realizing when something no longer fits the life you're building. People nodded along like this was all very reasonable. Then he looked at me. That was when the room turned quiet. He said my name like it was a formality, like reading it off a document. He held out a stack of papers already opened to the last page. I remember thinking how prepared he was. His mother stepped forward before I could speak. She said this was for the best, that I should be grateful they were handling it cleanly. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. That made it worse. His father said I would leave with what I came in with. Nothing. He said it loudly so everyone could hear, so no one would question it later. People stared. Some looked uncomfortable, most didn't. I felt my legs move before my mind caught up. Each step toward Lucas felt unreal, like I was watching myself from far away. My hands were shaking. The pen felt heavy. Someone behind me laughed softly. That's when the cold hit my face. Champagne, thrown without hesitation. It soaked into my sweater, ran down my skin, dripped onto the marble floor. The glass shattered. For a second, no one spoke. His mother broke the silence. She called me ungrateful, said I had wasted her son's time. Her words weren't shouted, they were precise, practiced. I signed, not because I agreed, because I was trapped. Security was already there, waiting, like this had been rehearsed. They took my arms and guided me toward the door while Lucas placed folded cash into my hand. He didn't meet my eyes. Outside, the cold air burned my lungs. Snow covered the driveway. Someone shouted something I didn't catch. The door closed behind me. I stood there for a moment, holding money I didn't want, wearing clothes that still smelled like champagne. That was the moment everything collapsed. And 3 hours later, sitting alone in a diner with no place to go, I would finally learn just how carefully that collapse had been arranged. I sat in that diner, long after my coffee went cold. My sweater was still damp. The smell of champagne clung to me like I couldn't wash it off. I kept my arms folded tight, not just from the cold, but because if I relaxed even a little, I felt like I might fall apart completely. I counted my money twice. It didn't change. I checked my bank balance. It was worse than I expected. I stared at the door, half expecting someone to walk in and say this was all a misunderstanding, that Lucas was sorry, that we could talk. That part of me still wanted that scared me more than the silence. Then my phone rang. Restricted number. I almost didn't answer. Who calls at a time like that? I let it ring until the screen went dark. Then it rang again, and again. Something in my chest tightened. I picked up. The woman on the other end spoke carefully, like she didn't want to scare me. She said my name, not the one people usually used. The full one, the one I'd only seen on old paperwork. I told her she had the wrong person. She didn't argue, she just said, please listen, 5 minutes. I wanted to hang up. I didn't have room for hope. Hope had already done enough damage. But when I looked out the diner window and saw a black car parked where it hadn't been before, I stayed on the line. They didn't rush me. They showed me documents, photos, dates, proof that made my hands start shaking again, but for a different reason this time. They spoke about my birth like it was a fact, not a story, about a woman who looked like me, about a man who had been searching for decades. I didn't cry right away. I felt empty, like my body had decided this was too much to process all at once. When they finally stopped talking, the diner felt too loud, too bright. I realized my entire life had been built on missing information. I could walk away, pretend I never answered the phone, go back to surviving. Or I could stop running. I thought about the papers I'd signed, the money I didn't know I owed, the way they'd smiled while humiliating me. I took a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I need time, I said. The woman nodded. Take what you need, but understand this, what was taken from you wasn't just money. That night, for the first time, I didn't ask myself how to endure. I asked myself what it would look like to fight back. And that question changed everything. Justice didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came quietly, slowly, paper by paper. I didn't confront anyone right away. I learned instead. I listened. I let people underestimate me the same way they always had. That part was easy. I'd been invisible my whole life. I stayed out of sight while lawyers handled things that made my head spin at first. Ownership, records, transfers, names that carried weight in rooms I'd never been allowed into. I learned to sit still and not react, even when I wanted to scream. The Ashfords didn't notice anything at first. Lucas was busy pretending his life was improving. New wife, new image. He smiled more online than he ever had at home. His parents moved fast, too. New deals, bigger risks. They were trying to lock in a future before anyone could question the past. That rush was their mistake. The first call came to Lucas on a Tuesday morning. I know because he later told someone it came out of nowhere. A bank asked about discrepancies tied to his name, loans he thought were buried, signatures that didn't hold up under review. He laughed it off. Then the second call came, and the third. By the end of the week, his accounts were frozen. Gregory's company followed soon after. Investors pulled out quietly, one by one, no announcements, no drama, just silence where confidence used to be. Deals stopped closing, phones stopped ringing. Eleanor blamed everyone but herself. She always had. The real moment came at a board meeting I didn't attend in person. I didn't need to. Everything was already in motion. Audits, investigations, questions no one could dodge anymore. Names were read out loud. Documents were projected onto screens. Mistakes they thought were buried resurfaced. Lucas finally understood when his lawyer stopped returning calls. By the time they realized who had pulled the thread, It was too late to stop the unraveling. I didn't show up to watch them fall apart. I didn't need that image in my head. What mattered was the quiet aftermath. The way the Ashford name suddenly meant hesitation. The way doors stopped opening for them. The way people who once laughed at my expense now avoided eye contact. There were consequences. Legal ones, financial ones, social ones, the kind that don't fade after the news cycle moves on. I didn't take everything from them. I took certainty. And when the dust finally settled, there was no announcement, no victory speech, just a strange, steady calm. For the first time, no one was speaking for me. And that felt like justice. I thought winning would feel louder. I thought there would be relief that hit all at once, or anger finally leaving my body, or some moment where I stood still and thought, this is it. This is the part where it makes sense. It didn't happen that way. What I felt was quiet. The kind of quiet you only notice after years of noise. I moved into a small place that was mine, nothing extravagant, just clean, safe, mine. I bought furniture slowly. I slept through the night for the first time in years. No phone face down on the table, no footsteps in the hallway making my chest tighten. I stopped replaying conversations in my head. I stopped wondering what I could have done differently. The Ashfords faded in pieces, not dramatically, just less and less. Their names stopped coming up. Their circle shrank. The confidence they used to wear so easily disappeared. People like that don't know who they are without an audience. Lucas tried to contact me once. A short message. No apology, just confusion, like he still thought I owed him clarity. I didn't respond. I didn't need him to understand. I needed myself to finally believe what I'd known deep down for a long time. That I wasn't difficult. I wasn't ungrateful. I wasn't lucky to be chosen. I had been convenient. I visited my parents' graves on a cold morning months later. Snow on the ground, quiet all around. I stood there longer than I meant to. I didn't say much. I didn't need to. For once, I felt like I belonged exactly where I was. On the way back, I realized something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not because they didn't deserve it, but because anger had stopped having a place to live inside me. They didn't break me. They didn't make me strong either. They showed me the truth. And sometimes, that's the most dangerous gift of all. I walked away knowing one thing with absolute certainty. The night they humiliated me wasn't the end of my story. It was the moment I stopped letting them tell it.